Hello, everybody. I'm Joshua Sexton with Geek Impulse, and I'm here with the amazing composer, Patric Caird.
Correct.
I said that correctly, right? The
You
last
did,
name.
yeah,
I know I
thanks.
asked you beforehand. I didn't want to butcher that. So, we're here today to talk about your Netflix series, The Order, that you're working on. But before we get to that, I want to talk about a few more nostalgic things.
Mm-hmm.
So some of our fans might be able to connect the dots even more with your work than they already have, and that is like let's start off with Ed, Ed and Eddy, for example. You did, I think it was like 76 episodes of that. Why don't you tell us how it was that a couple things. One, how'd you get started doing that, and then what was your process like for that show?
I got started doing that because I was working with Danny Antonucci, who's the creator of Ed, Ed, and Eddy. And coincidentally, the producer, Danny's producer back in the old days, was Dennis Heaton, the creator of The Order.
Mm.
So what goes around keeps going around. And starting as a saxophone player and writing a lot for the bands that I played in. And it kind of occurred to me at one point that improvising is kind of like composing in real time on your feet in front of a crowd of people. And I sort of took that. I loved film and I loved television. And I just sort of became more interested in composing and how music affects story. And shifted basically when I was touring in a band when I had my kids and I was on the road for 180 days a year. And so I thought maybe there's a better way to make a living as a musician than being an absentee parent. So I started writing for cartoons, actually. And it was Danny Antonucci, who we were living in the same housing complex. And he was working at a place called International Rocket Ship for Marv Newland. I don't know if you know.
I'm not too familiar, to be quite honest.
Yeah, Marv is a madman and famous, probably mostly famous for his short film Bambi Meets Godzilla. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Anyway, so Marv had this fantastic group of ne'er-do-wells at this place called International Rocket Ship, and I got involved doing music for their projects, and I was also doing sound effects for them as well. It just kind of grew from there, from animation into documentary, and then long-form drama, films, and TV series.
Now, every composer, they have their way in which they become inspired for whatever they're composing for, right? What is your process like? Is it something you could show us, or something you just want to talk about? Like, how is the process for you when coming up with these original ideas for whatever project it is you're working on?
It changes project to project, depending on what the needs of it are, and also depending on the collaborators, how they like to work. Some people want to get music at the script stage, and they want to hear sounds and they want to be involved there. Other guys, they're busy making their show and they want to hear it when they need it, rather than don't bother me with that, So for me personally, I like to read a script. I like to get an idea of what it is, but at the end of the day, I mean, I'm responding to what's on camera, and a lot of it is what the DP's done and the production design, and certainly the actors and how they look and how they're treating stuff. That's sort of where I get my juice from.
Okay. And let's touch on The Order, right? It's a Netflix show. It's an amazing show. There's a lot of dare I say, kind of esoteric things that go into that.
Yeah.
Right. And how was it that you were able to come up with those things? Like, what did you tap into? Did you go and sit in Stonehenge and listen to old folk music? I mean, how did you come about creating some of these things that really captivate the attention of the audience that's watching in such a way where they really connect on a more esoteric way with that kind of music?
Well, Dennis Heaton's just a great collaborator, so he gives me a lot of latitude and kind of says, you're the musician, you do the music, but he also knows a lot about music, and he knows, we have a long and a long relationship, so we have a lot of touchstones that we can go back to. And in the order, for example, when it first started up and I looked at the scripts and was talking to Dennis about maybe how we would approach it, I was thinking, it's a young adult show. It's kind of modern sounding. We can go with synths and we can go with percussion and he was excited by yeah, let's go there, because Dennis and I had just worked on a show called Ghost Wars for Netflix that Simon Barry was co-show running. And that score was mostly orchestral and kind of mid-20th century Polish music, like as challenging as it can get, for the ghosts and the scary stuff. And I thought it worked really well. Anyway, so when we got to the order, we wanted to change it up a little bit. And I had done a bunch of demos for Dennis that had really aggressive, modern sounding stuff going on, kind of like Eskimo and Amon Tobin, really these fantastic synthesis guys that are making these incredible sounds. And we were quite excited by it. And so we started making the actual show and finding that the show wanted to hear something else. The show wanted something else. And one of the words that kept coming up in our discussion of the music goes, yeah, this is great. It just needs to be more operatic, he would say. And so we kind of went from this modern approach to Verdi and Puccini and these big broad strokes of, dramatic, almost over the top, nearly over the top, but not quite over the top, as close to the over the top as we could get.
And how would you say each episode, can you really explain how the music evolves? Like, is there like a really, everything has a story to it, right? I mean, with films and TV and all these things that are going on, everything gets tied in, personally, I believe, with the compositions and the sound design. Yes, the actors do the acting and they're good at what they're doing, and you have the set design and you have all these elements to it that help create this cohesion. But I feel like a lot of the magic with what's going on is from the musical scores, a lot of these things. So how has things evolved per each episode and leading up to, and we want to talk about like, I think it's episode 10 where there's a sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
Like how does this all lead up to this and how does it tie in from your perspective?
Well, that's a great example of how it all does come together, because there were, over the course of the show, these different themes would emerge for different characters. And Edward Covington had his own kind of theme, and the Order had its own sort of throbbing. Those were the big, operatic kind of chords. And then the Knights and the Werewolves, they had their own vibe, and that was another thing. And then for that scene where the sacrifice takes place, the music goes from Edward Covington's theme. He's talking to Alyssa, and then we cut away to Vera and the Order trying to get into that room, and we get a little taste of that. And then the werewolves show up, and we get a little taste of them. And then we cut back into the room where the sacrifice is happening, and he sacrifices, spoiler alert, he sacrifices Jack. And the music keeps going because it's a switch. It's not really Jack. Jack is sent, what do they call them? A golem in. And then Jack appears in the shadows, and then the Jack and Alyssa love theme plays. And then Edward's fairly pissed about this. And then we go back into Edward as he starts to dissolve away. And then it cuts to a great piece of licensed music called Tomorrow that I had to write into it. And then the licensed music carries the scene to the end. And then I had to play a little tag on the way out when we change scenes.
And I think you have something that you would like to show us, correct?
It's right here, yeah.
Let's go ahead and get into that.
All right.
He'll die. Well, as long as he dies first.
All of you, leave.
So here's
now.
Vera and the Order theme. Hello, werewolves. So they get their little percussion, synthy sounds. This is the big show theme.
We're sealed up from the inside.
That's Edward's theme up there in the high horns.
Why is it working?
Probably because you sacrificed the golem.
Piano plays their love theme.
You're right. Sometimes the aggressive game is the wrong tactic.
No! I killed you! You lied to me! Whatever happens next is on you.
Bad news for Edward. He's lost his power.
Now, let's be clear. Whatever happens next is on you.
Jack,
Glad to see you're not dead.
Sam hell.
So that's all of those things coming together.
So that was awesome. Thanks for sharing that with us. And so I guess my next question really would be, how do you come about saying, I'm going to use this instrument, I'm going to use a piano here, I'm going to use a guitar or what have you, or saxophone, whatever instrument it is. How do you come about saying, what, this is what I think would be best here?
The show kind of will call for what it needs. And then also it's the taste of the showrunner and the producers and what they're feeling. I mean, for example, there is no saxophone in the order, at least not yet. But also I think instruments have a certain emotional resonance. A piano, for example, in that clip when Jack shows up, the piano has a kind of an earnestness and a warmth and a familial kind of feeling, and so that brings you into that lends itself to that. And then when Edward starts to dissolve, that's the big synth sound that comes in and starts to bend and twist, and sort of like I just imagine what it would be like to dissolve. And I do it.
Well, so you're from Canada originally, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And you've also won a lot of awards. I mean, you've got accolades, right? It's not like you just came in yesterday and started composing. You actually have gotten awards.
Yes. Yeah. I won the Canadian Academy Award for a film score I did called Here's to Life that starred Eric McCormick and James Whitmore and Kim Hunter. And it was a great sort of old folks family show. It was really a beautiful movie. And then I've won awards for my television work. I've been nominated also I worked on The Dead Zone, and I've been nominated for songs. I also write songs, so nominated for Best Song for an independent film called True Love, TRULOVE. Oh, okay. Yeah. And the Park City Music Award. I won Most Effective Use of Music in a film.
Really?
Gold medal. Yes.
Oh wow. Why don't you expand on that a little bit more?
It was a film called The French Guy, and I wrote the score, and I wrote all the source music, and it was a kind of a horror, psychological slasher, dark comedy movie. And in one of the scenes, there's one scene where there's a live string quartet playing, and I'd written the string quartet, and then there's a murder happening in the next apartment. So we go from the live string quartet playing my piece, and then when we cut to the murder happening, it's coming through the wall, but it actually scores the murder.
Oh,
and
wow.
then we go back to the string quartet back and forth.
Awesome.
I think Well, and then also I did win there's a documentary film festival in Yorkton that's very world famous, and I won an award for a film called The Boys of Buchenwald, which the title says it all, about kids of the prison camps. But yeah, so I won for best music on that too.
That's amazing. That seems to be more of a emotional
Oh yeah,
piece, right?
that's actually kind of interesting, because the filmmaker, who's a dear friend of mine, and we'd worked together on many projects. I watched her movie and I scored it for male choir, baritones and basses, and a boy soprano singing a melody over top, and the men were basically just chanting words, mother, father, brother, sister. Really compelling, spooky stuff. And then you get these archival shots of what's going on there, and the kids. And Audrey calls me up. I send her the music, and she calls me up. She goes, "Patrick, your music is really scary. I don't know if it's right." And I go, "Audrey, have you seen your movie? Your movie is really scary. I think it's perfect." And so it won the award.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Well, I want to thank you for allowing us to interview today. Last thing I have is a couple things. One, where can people find you? Or you're on social media?
I am.
Please let the audience know where they can find you. And then also let us know, what do you have coming up? Is there any other big projects? Has there been approval for season 2? I'm not sure.
Yeah. We have season 2.
Right. So what can we expect from you next as well?
Well, you can find me at patriccaird.com, and that's Patrick without a K, Caird, CAIRD.com. I have links to tracks from various shows. There's some stuff from The Order up on there. And coming up next is season 2 of The Order. I just finished a great independent horror film with someone I collaborate with a lot, Karen Lamb. It's called The Curse of Willow Song, and it's a beautiful, all shot in black and white in Vancouver. And it's moody and dark and weird, and the special effects are fantastic. So I'm really excited about that. That's coming up. And I just finished a web series called Save Me for the CBC in Canada that I really enjoy doing. And I'm working on a musical with the creator of Save Me as we speak.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for allowing us to interview you today. And we'll talk again soon.
Thank you, Joshua.